Hey, you welcome to the Harmatiology lesson, and this is the theological study of sin. In this lesson, we're going to be considering three themes. Number one, the nature of sin. Number two, the various forms of sin. And number three, the theories of the origin of sin. By the end of this lesson, you would have gotten a systematic understanding of sin and how it affected human beings in relationship to God. Let's go. Why do we need to study sin? We need to study sin in order to understand what Adams did to us and what Jesus came to deliver us from. So, to start with, we're going to talk about the essence of sin. Exactly what is sin? Sin essentially means the urge to be independent of God. Theologically, sin happens when human beings rebel against God, when we want to do things in our own way and not the ways of God. Practically, it is human beings choosing their own way in contrast to the ways of God. Now, this urge for independence can express itself in three different forms. We have the hedonist urge, we have the covetous urge, and we have the prideful urge, or the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. So what is the hedonist urge? The hedonist urge is the pleasure urge. It is the urge that drives us to satisfy every desire of the flesh. It was what happened to Eve when she saw that the fruit was pleasing and would be good for food, even though God said, do not eat it. So that is the hedonist urge. Fornication, adultery, drunkenness, pornography, masturbation, all these are various forms, all these are various manifestations of the hedonist urge. What about the covetous urge? So that is the urge to satisfy the things that your eyes see. So you see money, you see luxurious car, you see the wig of another lady, you see the expensive clothing you see the expensive clothing of another person, and you have the greed to achieve or acquire it. That is the covetous urge. And Satan tried to trap Jesus with this when he showed him all the kingdoms of the world and said, just bow to me and I will give this to you. That is the covetous urge. And the last way in which the essence or the nature of sin expresses itself, that urge for independence, is the prideful urge. So the prideful urge is essentially self-exaltation. When you exalt yourself, when you want to give glory to yourself other than give glory to God. Remember when Satan asked Jesus to jump from the temple and the angels would bury him? See, that was an attempt to make Jesus self glorify himself before the people. I mean, think about it. A person jumped from the temple, the height, and angels literally picking him off. That would have given glory to Jesus in the sight of the people as opposed to God. So, those are the three urges of independence as reviewed by sin: the, the hedonist urge, the covetous urge, and the prideful urge. Another thing to know about the nature and the essence of sin in how it affected us is something called total depravity. Total depravity explains how the sin that we inherited from Adam totally destroyed us, totally corrupted us in a way that we can practically do no good things toward God. The Bible describes us as dead, as object of wrath, as enemies of God. It is because of sin and how it's totally made our being to be completely incompatible with the divine essence of God. So now that we've taken the essence or the nature of sin out of the way, let us examine the various forms of sin. Sin expresses itself in various forms, and we're going to look at them now. Number one, the most obvious one, is the sin of commission. What is the sin of commission? The sin of commission is when we deliberately do the things God has said we should not do, when we deliberately commit sin. For example, God said, thou shalt not kill. If you commit murder, that is a sin of commission. The next one is the sin of omission. The sin of omission occurs when we do not do things that we ought to do. So Jake said, if anyone knows what is right to do but does not do it, such is guilty of sin. So that is an example of a sin of commission. A practical instance, when the Bible said, pray always, and if a believer does not pray all the time, that is an example of a sin of omission, because we know what we ought to do and we are not doing it. Another expression of sin is outward expression. These are the sins we commit external to our body: stealing, murder, fornication, adultery, all these things, idolatry. All these things are committed outside of us. Then we have the inward expression. That means the sins of attitude, hatred, anger, bitterness, jealousy, covetousness. These are things that are inside of us. They are attitudinal, but they are still sinful nonetheless. Then we have conscious rebellion. This is willfully, despite the laws of God being clear to the subject, going against it. This is someone who understands what the will of God is about something, but still goes ahead and do what is contrary to what God has ordered. See, that is conscious rebellion, and it's another manifestation of sin. Another manifestation of sin, another form of expression is this. Another form of expression is another form of the another form of the expression of sin is the gradation of sinfulness. For example, there are greater sins and there are lesser sins. Both of them are sins, but one is greater than the other. For example, in 1 Corinthians 6:17, Paul was talking about how sexual immorality, the sin committed against the body, is greater than some sins committed outside of the body. And John was also talking about some sins that lead to death and some that do not lead to death. All acts of righteousness is sin, but some sins are greater than others. Finally, we have the systemic or the social manifestation of sin. So these are sins that show themselves in societal institutions like police brutality, like racism, like slavery. These things show themselves in organized human society. And now let us talk about the origin of sin, or what you might have heard to be original sin. Essentially, when we talk about original sin, we asking the question, where did sin come from? And there are two predominant theories that try to explain where sin came from. Number one, we have the federal or the representative theory of original sin. It says there is a representative of the human race, and because he sinned, then we sinned. So the Bible said, just like sin came from one man, Adam, also salvation or righteousness came from one man's obedience, and that is Jesus. So this is the idea of the federal or the representative theories of original sin, that our sin came from our representative, Adam, and because he sinned and we came from Adam, therefore we sin. And the Bible supports this. Secondly, we have the realist or the Augustinian view, which practically says sin is transferred through sexual transmission. So the parents pass it on through the child. And he argues that the reason Jesus was made sinless is because he had no earthly father and he came directly from God. If he had come from human beings, sin would have been transferred to him from his earthly father. Of course, many people do support that, but I personally do not. I go with the representative theory of sin. So that's it. We are done. That is the introduction to sin. Now you can define what sin is. You can define the three manifestations of the urge of independence from God, which is sin, and you can explain the various manifestations of sin. And finally, you can talk about the original sin and the two theories of the original sin amongst humanity. Now, the next thing we're going to go to is something called Christology, and that is the theological study of the person and the works of Christ. One of my personal favorites in systematic theology. If you found this video helpful, please like the video, subscribe to this channel, and send this video to your believer friend so they can learn what you're learning. Till next time that we see, bye.